And for a diamond to be produced, it must first go through extreme heat, extreme pressure. Are you hearing what I'm telling you? For a diamond to be produced, it has to go through extreme pressure. If you can't take pressure, then you're not a diamond.
I push through the struggle and level up out of my pain. Cause I got a fire inside me that cannot be tamed. Yeah. Jump in the vortex of fortune, I don't need the fame. Put that on source, need a legacy off of my name. Talking about pressure, pressure, pressure. Lately been feeling it. Pressure, pressure, pressure. I cannot crack under pressure, pressure, pressure. Diamonds get made out of pressure. Diamonds get made out of. Diamonds get made out of.
Sodom and Gomorrah, the rise of satanic degeneracy, the loss of traditional moral values. It is exactly as was written. So they predict what modern science predicts, and even down to how humans will behave. Honestly, how many of these coincidences are we supposed to ignore? Well, let's add on another one. It seems the governments and elites are preparing for exactly this. They are acting recklessly because they know there will be no reckoning. They are spending like there's no tomorrow because on a realistic timeline, there isn't one. Governments are digging underground, and elites like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are expanding their options. Bezos is digging out a mountain in the Sierra Diablos right across the street from his Blue Origin launch facility. And Elon Musk has SpaceX and the Boring Company. Celebrities and billionaires are buying doomsday bunkers at a surprising rate. Even Andrew and Tristan Tate are building one in Romania. Folks, most of science is one vector, one line of evidence, and then best estimations or guesses about what it means. This is not most science. It is the same story told by Earth's history, paleoclimatology, paleomagnetism, fossils, sediment, solar system physics, astrophysics, galactic physics, modern observations, math, religion, culture, and the movement of the elites matches up. Don't listen to what they say. Just watch what they do. Speaking of math, current rate of change suggests we have only 10 to 20 years left. So will you acknowledge the mountains of evidence singing the same song? Or will you let the world distract you? Will you let disbelief dissuade you? Your future and your children's future depends on your answer.
In the 20th century, clouds were seeded by numerous countries around the globe with various chemicals to produce rain. China was just doing this over the summer in Beijing to make sure that there weren't any rain, that there wasn't any rain during the Olympics. But all this has changed dramatically with the U.S. military's secretive research and plans to control the planet's natural weather. This has not been given very much press, and we have to remember that we have a corporate-owned press where 85% of radio, television, and print media is owned by 5 corporations. So they're not going to talk about things that are of really serious consequence, and that's somewhat of the blessing, a mixed blessing of the internet, but there's certainly plenty of information on weather modification. The Air Force is on record as saying, quote, they want to control the weather by 2025, and we are not talking about just seeding the clouds for rain. Weather modification means, quote, any activity performed with the intention of producing artificial changes in the composition, behavior, or dynamics of the atmosphere, unquote. And as of April this year, there are more than 150 different weather modification programs around the world. Since about 2000, the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy have been spraying the entire United States sky with a toxic brew of chemicals and other biologic agents. Do we have that? Can we do that? Just want to show you something. We have 2 different kinds of trails in the sky right now. One are called contrails. How many of you know what contrails are? Contrails are what have been around from the ends of planes since World War II. These are very, very short exhaust trails that usually evaporate within a few minutes. You just look up at the sky and you'll just see a jet, sometimes with 4 trails, but it evaporates pretty quickly. How many of you know what chemtrails are? Nobody. The military and some commercial planes are spraying us with what are called chemtrails. I want you to look at the, and oftentimes before there's a weather front, there are heavy assaults from these planes just before a weather front is changed and comes in. Military and some commercial jets have been fitted with huge barrels of at least 49 different kinds of documented chemical poisons. Among other documented ingredients in this toxic man-made clouds are pathogenic molds, fungi, weaponized viruses, and made in some places like the secret site at Fort Detrick, Maryland, which is supposed to be a cancer site, but there are a number of scholars and professors tracking this that have big questions about this. Barium and nanoaluminum particles. What do these do to the human body? Barium is an alkaline earth mineral. It was discovered in 1774. At low doses, it can act as a muscle stimulant. At high doses, it detrimentally affects the heart and the nervous system. Barium is toxic to all mammals, and that means not just humans. Aluminum, which is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, is known to diminish kidney function and destroy brain cells and cognitive function. Just think about it. Just between the aluminum and the mercury that we're breathing all the time, we've got already a serious issue about brain function and cognitive function. There is also documented evidence that the aluminum in chemtrails is released as nanoparticles, and that when they reach the Earth environment for wildlife, in lakes and streams, it's causing serious problems with wildlife there. Researchers are also finding that nanoparticles interfere with the growth of plants. Nanotechnology is totally unregulated. Just this past month, a new research report came out showing and documenting for the first time that these nanoparticles actually go through the skin. Well, if you breathe them, whether they go through the skin or whether you're inhaling them, it's still a problem.
U.S. ranchers are shocked to see the biggest drop in cattle production in almost 60 years. Costs are shooting up as well, with everything from livestock to supplies to feed and fuels facing increases of more than 50%. Industry experts say that now profitability is in jeopardy, and many operations are becoming unviable due to the massive losses farmers and ranchers have suffered in recent years. The outlook couldn't be gloomier for the nation's food supply chain. Beef prices are expected to skyrocket as inventory shrinks even more in the months ahead. This is an unprecedented crisis that will hit producers, retailers, and consumers alike and trigger some worrying consequences for our food systems. We've a lot to cover in today's video, but before moving on, we kindly ask you to support our work with a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Beef producers in the U.S. are still thinning their herds in near record numbers, and experts are warning that this will lead to some alarming supply problems in the beef industry starting this summer. In the past few years, extreme drought has prompted U.S. ranchers to reduce their herd sizes by sending more cattle to slaughter, explains Desmond Subal, principal economist with Farm Credit. Typically, this would drive cattle prices down, but now, in an environment of inflation and high demand, prices are at record levels, and if there's less supply in the future, that will push up prices further, consequently affecting consumer prices, Subal says. In 2022, producers sold thousands of extra cattle in the fall to make up for a shortage in feed, adds Stuart Smythe, associate professor in the College of Agriculture and Bioresources. People just had to take a huge hit that year, he said. When the U.S. runs low on corn or feed, it imports from Canada. but the neighboring country was facing the same shortages last year, highlighted Dennis Leecraft, Executive Vice President of the U.S. Cattle Association. But importing feed can't always solve the problem on its own. Cattle producers are used to dealing with extreme situations, Leecraft stressed. Unfortunately, when you get multiple years in a row, that's where you start to run out of the feed inventories, and that forces you into more difficult decisions in terms of reducing cattle numbers. Given that this spring is also dry in many regions, in some areas just as bad as 2022, that forced producers to sell, Smythe said. Right now, more than 2/3 of the U.S. cattle herd is in an area affected by drought, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, leading to the largest contraction of the U.S. cattle herd in 60 years. In fact, U.S. producers have contracted their herds 3 years in a row for a variety of reasons. And while this means more beef was being produced in the short term, it meant that supply would eventually go down as herds got smaller and producers sent fewer cattle to slaughter while they tried to rebuild their herds. Although it is normal for production to fluctuate from year to year, this time something is different, says Sabor. In central North Dakota, for example, the 2022 drought reached disastrous levels, wreaking havoc on farmers, ranchers, and their land. One such rancher was Shane Anderson of Towner, who had been ranching on his family land for nearly 20 years, building his own herd of commercial cattle, only to be forced to scale back his herd. It was a multitude of things, but just knowing in the back of my mind that we had not had any moisture in the spring, I didn't want to get to a place where I was trying to move bears in the middle of summer, Anderson says, of making the decision to sell cattle last year. In an average year, his ranch runs 300 to 350 head. During 2022's drought, he sold over 100 heads. When we were in the middle of the breeding season, it looked like our hay crop was already going to be adversely affected. I felt better making the decisions to move that many animals, knowing that if it started to rain, I would be able to graze more acres later or do something with that grass, he revealed. If I didn't think this through, then every decision I made from there on out would probably be a knee-jerk reaction and maybe wouldn't be the best option. Just like Anderson, many had to make tough decisions due to less in forage, pastures, and rangeland. I'm definitely noticing an increase in dispersals coming into the bred cow sales this year, exposed Kiernan Brandt, SDSU Extension cow-calf field specialist. You can definitely tell that the increase in feed prices is driving some folks to bring some additional bred cows to sale. I think a lot of guys, especially on the western part of the state, are pretty quick to pull that trigger early in the year and say, "We're dry. We're going to make cuts early," Brandt says. By now, hundreds of ranchers just did full dispersal of everything over 8 years old, he notes. The same concerns beef producers faced in the past couple of years are likely to linger for 2023. The year following a drought year can be tough for forage production for grazing, even with normal precipitation, explains Jerry Volsky, Nebraska Extension Range and Forage Specialist. The reasons are most likely associated with the reduced root and rhizome growth, formation of new buds, and overall energy reserve status of grazing plants, he says. In Kansas, Pratt Livestock Assistant Manager Steve Stratford says that everybody is concerned about what will happen this summer. There's no hay left, no pasture can we get rain. That plus inflation and the high cost of inputs right now, expenses are just crazy, and we don't know what to do. It's just downright hard to find any hay, Stratford emphasized. The hay pipeline from northern and eastern regions where they did have some rain last year has been used up. There are no local supplies left. There is nothing to bring in. Usually at this time we see pasture greening up or we have wheat to put them out on, but that is not happening. Stratford revealed that many Pratt County producers were forced to overgraze their pastures through the winter because there just wasn't hay locally to bring the cows in and feed them. It's bad. It's really bad out there, he describes. You can drive around and just look. There is no pasture coming. We need rain in the worst way. On top of that, the cost of inputs such as minerals, premix, and proteins, additives that can extend feed supplies or make poorer quality feed palatable or part of a balanced ration, faced price increases of more than 50%, putting them out of reach for the typical local cattle producer. This drought situation is affecting everyone, Stratford said. If we don't get rain in the next week or two, you will see the biggest sell-off of beef cattle in the area that has ever happened in history. There are third and fourth generation producers here today wondering how they're gonna make it. They're being forced into selling because there is no feed left. We are in jeopardy. At the same time, local hay producer Jim Berkner said that all kinds of hay are at a premium right now, but there's little for sale and little to find. If you have hay, it is a precious commodity, he outlines. Local cattle producers Rocky and Linda Fox have raised beef southwest of Pratt for decades, considering livestock diversification in light of the difficulties in the cattle industry. No matter what, the cattle have to be fed, Linda Fox said. We will all be standing in bread lines before we give up, but it is getting serious out here. The Director of Public and Governmental Affairs at the Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, Brett Maline, highlighted that it's more than just the hay prices leading people to give up their cows. Equipment costs, diesel fuel, supplies, everything is going up, he stressed. The farmers were having a hard time even being able to get some of their fertilizer, let alone afford it. So that's cut into the crop yields. For some farmers, the cost barrier is even greater than supplies, Maline said. We're getting more and more people that are just selling their grass instead of running, a cow-calf operation or cow yearling. They're just running livestock for somebody else to help cut their risk. They can't afford to buy back in. From now on, producers will increasingly struggle with profitability amid the unpredictable seasons, as climate change makes drought, flooding, and wildfires more common, the experts warned. During the 2023 Cattle Industry Convention in New Orleans, market analysts with Cattle Facts told beef producers that this could be a record price year for all classes of cattle. Economist Kevin Good of Cattle Facts said that in 2022, we had a 13.5% culling rate across the industry. That is the highest ever. Slaughter numbers of both cows and finished cattle will be shrinking in 2023, and buyers will have to pay up to get what they want. In normal times, when producers reduce their herds and beef production goes up, prices for cattle go down, which in turn can soften prices along the supply chain. But because of inflation and continued high demand for beef, producers are still seeing elevated prices for their cattle, further incentivizing them to reduce their herds, the analyst wrote in a report. It's not pushing down those prices as you'd normally see, they said. That's likely to remain the case and could affect prices along the supply chain all the way to retail, he said. Since producers can only contract their herds so much, eventually they will need to sell fewer cattle and rebuild the herd, which means less production over the next few months, and that usually sends cattle prices higher. If the U.S. face more droughts in the coming months and years, producers will struggle further even more. It would be tough for the sector, that's for sure, the analyst added, warning that you can't lose money for that many years and still be a viable operation. It won't take a lot of time for people not directly tied into cattle production to notice less beef in the grocery stores. There is a shortage coming. By the end of the summer, if we don't get any rain, there will be a considerable lack of beef for the consumer. The imbalances between supply and demand are only growing larger. In fact, last year, we had the highest per capita U.S. beef consumption in 12 years at 58 pounds. Still, in the face of that supply, We also had record retail beef prices at $7.35 per pound. You can expect to pay way more for beef for the rest of the year and well into 2024. The number of beef cows, which amounts to about a third of all cattle and calves in the U.S., remains at the smallest count since 1963. This crisis could literally break our food systems and spark shortages that would persist for way longer than anyone could ever imagine. Our food supply chains are already in shambles, and any new disruption has the potential to trigger a cascade of failures that would send not only ranchers but retailers and consumers over the edge. This will ultimately affect all of us and effectively transform beef into a luxury item that only a very selected group of people will have access to. Unfortunately, all we can do is hope and pray that the drought eases and more rain comes along. Until then, make sure you stock up on your favorite meats before prices spiral from current levels. Thank you for watching.
President, Australian cities are becoming digital surveillance precincts with so-called smart city programs being rolled out across the country. Invasive technology such as facial recognition cameras, licence plate readers, smart lights, smart poles, smart cars, smart neighbourhoods, smart homes and smart appliances, all connected to wireless networks and communicating with each other. So what's wrong with that? Technology is good, isn't it? All this is for your safety, security and convenience, isn't it? Well, let me tell you, your streets are spying on you, your mobile phone is spying on you, your cities are spying on you, and the infrastructure for future lockdowns is being put into place right now. Don't be fooled. You're being set up to be tracked through your movements and through the future of your digital wallets. By handing over your data, you're handing over the ability to monitor your behaviour, which will soon be turned into a social credit score. And once the central bank digital currencies are in place, you won't get to spend your money without approval. Digital ID will soon become a reality in Australia. Many other countries are already rolling these systems out, countries like Canada, Scotland and many others. Eventually, you won't be able to access any government or public services, and you won't be able to travel across borders or access healthcare or the internet without a digital ID. Think you won't comply? I think you will. The last 2 years were the dress rehearsal and we fell for it hook, line and sinker. Australians are sleepwalking into this technocratic future, and while we're sitting around scratching our chins trying to work out whether this is really happening, Australia is drifting towards a dystopian digital.
We are on the brink of economic March madness. That's right. That was in February, and now we're in March. And what did the equity markets do today? Bam, boom, down hard. How come? Because the Fed had. The economy is strong and blah, 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 blah. No, it's not that strong. Manufacturing is getting really weak. You know, the whole export around the world is going down. Germany's that far from into recession. The whole thing is slowing down globally. Protests going on all over the world. Big one in France today, and this is just the beginning of it. Over in Israel, week after week. No, this thing's going down big and hard. You better prepare for March Madness. Oh, gold took a big hit today, too, down over $30. What does it mean? Where is it going? So this is very serious. Now the bet, it's almost 67% of the street is betting that the Fed's going to raise interest rates 50 basis points. All of those variable rate loans, interest rates going up. Oh, new loan applications for homes. It's only at a 28-year low. Is there going to be a housing crash? How about the office building bust? We've been talking about this only going on for 3 years, and now it's finally making the headline news. We are in for the worst socioeconomic and geopolitical crisis in modern history. And then we have Janet Yellen, who back in April of 2021 said, no, this inflation isn't real. Now she's saying the recession isn't real. So if they're spewing out the same garbage, we should swallow it. Because after all, they've been totally wrong before, so they must be right now. Or else they were lying about it, because everybody knew inflation was real. But they wanted to keep those zero interest rate policies so they could keep the equity markets going up. What did they pump in? $6.3 trillion, the government? They're doing everything they can to do it. The market should have crashed back in 2020. It should have been over. The businesses have been destroyed. Hey, let's not talk about office occupancy rates in America. They're only, around 40%. Cities like in New York, 35%. Oh, all those businesses, the dry cleaners, and the shoe repair, oh, the hairdressers, oh, happy hours, all gone, all gone. Oh, and now I'm renting, let's say I have 8 stories of a building. My people don't want to commute an hour and a half anymore on the LIE. You know, they hated it, going an hour and a half back and forth. I'll work from home 3 days a week, great. I'll save on rent. This is for real. Office occupancy rates in New York City, in Chicago, in San Francisco, they're in the toilet. And it's not only the office building bust. Business travel is nothing compared to what it used to be. We're Zooming. I don't want to send you over to, California. Yeah, get on a Zoom over here. I don't want to waste my money. No, you're not going to Paris. So now all those hotels, convention centers, and all those things that depended on heavy business travel, going down big time. The crisis that we're facing now is unprecedented. Unprecedented. The countless trillions of dollars that they've pumped into the economies around the world. Around the world. You're going to see, it's the new world disorder. You're looking at the emerging markets. Why is the dollar strong? The dollar's strong because all the other ones are so weak. Again, listen to the crap that's spewed out of the mouths of the central bankers. And now the European Union aggressively raised interest rates from minus 0.50 basis points to 0 interest rates. What, are you kidding me? What do they got? An 8.6% inflation rate? And the IMF I mentioned before? If you borrow money from the IMF, they tell you to raise your interest rates 1% above inflation, which means that our interest rates should be, 10.1%? Europe should be 9.6%. Look at the data coming out of Germany. The biggest, richest country, down, everything down, everything down. So they're saying now they're going to let inflation go over 2%, and they made up that 2% number in 2012. But they're going to start raising it at some point because investors plow money into TIPS vehicles. Funds that hold inflation-protected bonds are enjoying their longest streak of inflows in more than a decade as investors grid themselves for an increase in consumer prices as the U.S. economy recovers. European banks plan to slash business travel, bodes ill for airline recovery hopes. This is out of Financial Times. I'm mentioning this because commercial real estate sectors like New York, the big cities, conventions, trade shows, people traveling back and forth, there's going to be a lot less travel. Business travel is the most lucrative way airlines make money. That's where they make the dough, not on tourism travel. And now this thing's going to go down. If anybody doesn't see what's going on, you better grow up. This is a takeover of our freedom like you cannot imagine because we've never seen this in our living history. In the past, this has happened. We are facing the greatest socioeconomic and geopolitical crisis in human history. We only warned about this in the Trends Journal. When people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it. We only warned about the office building bust only 3 years ago. This thing is out of control. By the way, over there in Portland, Libchard, Oregon. Yeah. The Walmarts are closing down. You know why? Because crime is going up. People are robbing shit everywhere. This did not happen before COVID, but nobody's talking about this. See what shoppers are doing and where this thing is going to go? Millennials, they're only about $4 trillion in debt, and it's going to get a lot worse. The average mortgage rate now, they're going up as high as over 7%. What does that mean? And again, top trend 2023, office building bust. You know what else is happening? Major retailers are leaving the big cities because of the crime rate, and they're going to the burbs.
Schumer and crazy Nancy Pelosi are the sinister faces of this corrupt and lawless political establishment. They enrich their families in Ukraine, China, Russia, while they set violent criminals loose without charges while prosecuting their political opponents for fabricated crimes. They legalize mass robberies and cheer for BLM and Antifa rioters, ransacking our cities while they hold nonviolent protesters without trial, destroy their lives. They indoctrinate your children to hate their parents while calling you a hateful racist. They stick the FBI on mothers at school board meetings while they teach 4-year-olds to pick their own genders. Would you like to change your gender? And they say it's absolutely fine for a boy or man to participate in women's sports. I don't think